Hey Nick, how you doing today?
Greg, doing well. Thanks for asking. How about yourself?
I'm doing great, man. It's a beautiful Florida day here. Thanks
Oh,
for coming on
Florida.
the pod.
Yeah, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me. Been real excited for this all week.
Yeah, me too. Been looking forward to it. All right, so let's get started here. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about your practice and what you specialize in. What do you do?
Yeah, tactical wealth planning started about 2 years ago. I typically focus on a mentality and a perspective shift for people nearing retirement. It's called work optional. You know, we're voiced in and so used to the traditional I'm going to retire or retirement plan. There's this whole other phase known as work optional, which is prepping people maybe either earlier or towards the end of their career, burned out. That is, things need to happen to progress forward and take that next step. And that's what I like to do. I like to give people options. And like I said, it's based from a unique perspective shift versus just traditional math problems with a financial plan.
Interesting. So it sounds like you're taking like the human side of it, their goals, their individual situation, and maybe combining it with some traditional investing or something to help them move forward towards those things. But you said tactical. I got to ask. That's a very military word in
Yeah.
some cases. Do you have a military background?
That's a great question. And a lot of it and this whole work optional framework is based from I was a 911 paramedic, still am. Particular, I was a SWAT medic as well. So that's where the word tactical comes from. And I know it aligns well with finance, but there's a lot of awesome things that go on the tactical side that I can easily bring into the finance side as well. Hence the birth of tactical wealth planning.
So I got to ask, do you have that URL, tacticalwealthplanning.com?
It's actually tacticalwealthplan.com.
Tactical. Wow, that's a pretty good URL. I like that. That's good. You lucked
Took
out
some
on that
searching.
one, man.
It
Yeah.
took some searching, but that's the base of it. And I've had the privilege of doing a lot of cool things on the SWAT side as a medic, and why not carry it over to the financial plans?
Yeah, well, let's talk about that a little bit. So, at this point in the interview, I like to know where you kind of come from, the bigger picture, but also what inspired you, because that's one of the things that often differentiates people is the inspiration, your individual experience, and your background. So,
Sure.
what inspired you maybe to start doing this?
Yeah, I started my career out probably like many advisors did, big firms, familiar ones. Vanguard was there for 7 years. Went to then a little bit bigger of an RA that was acquired by a big company, Empower. I realized the experience there. It was great, but it was volume based.
Mm,
There was a client's just another number. Now, as much as personalization as I try to make it, it was still a cookie cutter, still served by the volume. Messaging was not mine. So
mm,
about 2 years ago, I was like, I can do this better. There's something that I need to convey and I want to provide to clients in a better way, and hence the launch of tactical wealth planning. And really, what kind of many iterations, long story short, was while I was doing this, I was still a 911 paramedic. I can't tell you how many times I saw, people, my ideal clients in the back of the ambulance where I couldn't but help think, are they financially secure to move past this, or is their
yeah.
family in a good situation? And, I was just like, that's a unique perspective that I think a lot of people
Yes.
connect with. And I decided to launch my own firm because I feel I can help a lot more people. I come from a servant background, hence the not the paramedicine, and now it's just carries over into my financial planning practice.
Yeah. I mean, you're a badass for sure. I love that back. All right, so let's talk. Sorry for cursing. If you're offended, if you're listening,
No,
you're
no
offended. Sorry.
offense at all, man. I've seen a lot of life. It's through and through. It's fine.
Yeah, I've got a blue collar background, so I don't know. And people,
Perfect.
yeah, it's perfect. All right, we're in the same same place here. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about the people that you connect with, the people that you serve, maybe you could take a second to describe the typical person that comes to you. What's a situation that they might come to you with that you would lead them through?
Yeah, typically I'm seeing and I deal with later career professionals, age mid 50s to early 60s, where they think they're secure, they think they can retire, but either they're working with an advisor currently who hasn't discussed anything related to income, healthcare, taxes. They're purely just an investment manager. And these people are not comfortable with stepping away from a paycheck, commission check, their health care, and they just want validation that, hey, what's the next 3 to 7 years look like for me?
Mm.
What if my job goes away? What if I have a medical event? So I'm typically those later burned out professionals, high earners. A lot of people work with, particular in the medical device sales and leadership side, pharmaceutical sales, because there's a lot of factors, a lot of good things in that industry, but it is a changing environment nonetheless. So,
What are some of the questions that they typically ask you when they first meet with you? Like, what are their concerns? Help us understand more about, bring us into that space.
yeah, the biggest thing is, do I have enough to retire? What can I survive off of my portfolio? What's the biggest downfall of going into retirement right now?
Mm,
The second biggest, honestly, is like, what do I do about healthcare?
mm,
How do I retire earlier? How do I make work optional when I have great employer healthcare? What do I do?
mm.
I'm still, 8 to 10 years away from Medicare. What are those solutions? And I think there's a lot of people out there that don't realize that there's a lot of factors that go into solving that problem, but also there's a lot of solutions out there that people don't really understand or piece together because they're used to, their company paid health insurance, and that's okay, but it holds them there. And that's why I want to create that work optional, because healthcare typically keeps people employed for probably longer than they potentially need to be. They'll suffer day in, day out,
Sure. Suffer.
suffer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, many cases you've been doing this for a really long time and you're in it, you're doing it, and then starting to think about what's next becomes appropriate to talk to somebody like you about that. And you're
Yeah.
saying like a lot of your clients will be held there because they think they have to be, because in many cases their insurance is so sweet at the organization. And in the States, we know health insurance is incredibly expensive. It sucks. So
Yeah.
naturally, having somebody like you to help them work through that transition, specifically around the healthcare, is something that would be really valuable to them, right?
100%. It's the number one in recent studies, number one handcuff to late stage high earner professionals of why they stay in the job, even though they consider retirement probably a year before, or it's constantly on their mind, health insurance, and then where they're going to get their paycheck from once they do decide to flip the switch of, hey, I want to be retired.
Yeah, I love that. I could see why helping them through that would be something that would be really valuable. All right, so we talked a little bit about the questions that they have, the situations that they're in. Maybe we could get more specific with demographics instead of psychographics.
Sure.
Are there any demographics that your ideal client might typically fall into? Things like age range, income, net worth, any tangible numbers for when it starts to make sense to work with you? Anything specific?
Yeah. So specifically, the work optional framework is kind of like a validation checkpoint. It's not necessarily retiring right now. It's more of a runway for the next 3 to 7 years. So if you're mid 50s, early 60s, and thinking about stepping away in the next 3 to 7 years, or you want validation and a secure plan to step away on a moment's notice, meaning your healthcare is secured, your taxes are designed for when you do step away. You know where you're going to get your income from once it does hit that retirement beach vacation, and your portfolio's de-risked or aligned to your actual needs at that standpoint in time. That time frame when you want to align all those is typically we're the right people for you. And you have an estimated net worth. Your portfolio is anywhere between $1 and $5 million. Obviously, it can be more than that. Just creates more options, but
Hmm.
that 1 to 5 suite range, there's a lot that can go right, but there's a lot can go wrong. As I've been doing
Sure.
this for 10 plus years, and taxes are one of them. Healthcare is another.
Yeah. So you've mentioned this a couple times, the work optional framework. Could you
Yeah.
explain this a little bit more? Is this your framework, or are you borrowing it from somewhere?
This is my framework through the
Ooh, I like that.
iterations of creating tactical wealth plan. Obviously, it started out serving high net worth individuals, and then it kind of narrowed in. But it is my framework. It stems from the back of the ambulance because there's a lot more to life than work in your later career. Yeah, it's secure, but I was tired of seeing people in the back of the ambulance, and I couldn't, like I said, I couldn't help but think, like, what's your retirement look like now? You
Mm.
probably could have stepped away 5 years sooner, and health is unpredictable, biologics are unpredictable, but your retirement can be predictable. But this work optional framework it's rooted and foundational in 4 pillars: healthcare, tax architecture, cash flow and income, and then the portfolio design.
Mm.
Integrating all 4 of those is what makes the runway of stepping away in 3 to 7 years possible.
Mm. I really like that because, anytime you can share the way that you work or the methodology that you follow, which could be very complex and very confusing, if you can figure out how to break it down into pillars, like chapters or sub chapters in a book, so to speak, it really helps people understand your unique approach. And I think that's important here. And I love how you've also related back to um, the bigger picture and why you do what you do. So that's great. Okay, let's talk a little bit more about your values and your approach, maybe a little bit about your philosophy.
Yeah.
Um, so, how do people typically find you? What are some of the ways you get to know your clients as individuals?
Yeah, typically, you know, I use a lot of LinkedIn. Um, my website draws in a lot of people, but I do a lot of it's referrals from, I'm going to be honest with you, my father, in a sense. My demographic is my dad. Early 60s, mid 60s, stepping away in the medical field in a sense, and you know, kind of just relating and telling that story and connection of, medical background and keeping things simple.
Mm-hmm.
This is not overcomplicated stuff, but it does need to align, and it does need to have a strategic tactical plan in order for it to be successful. So, that's, typically where people find me. My website and LinkedIn are where I'm most active on currently to, draw in and have people find me.
Yeah, I know a couple people who are first responders,
Yeah.
and one of the things that I've noticed about them, and this is the only, it's 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 immediately apparent, but when when I'm around them, and if things become stressful, they are so good at just not only keeping calm themselves, but making everybody else relaxed and keeping them calm. Because they've been in stressful situations, and that's just part of their job. So I'd imagine that when things in the market happen or things are scary, you just like you lock in, right? And I'm sure that energy translates to give your clients a lot of confidence too. Would you say that that's? I'm just making an assumption here, but
This is funny because I came across a picture last night. It's actually a meme. Describes exactly this. So it's a picture of like the back of an ambulance with like everything torn out of the cabinets, blood on the ground, all the tools on the ground. Like, for those, that don't know, that's the result of a bad but good call, right? Pretty interventionist call. And the caption on it is, "Tell me how I'm calm here, but overstimulated in Costco."
Yeah,
And
right.
that, I was like, it does resonate with myself because, as I mentioned earlier, the perspective of relation to finance, like, yeah, you're right, the markets go up and down. I mean, look at the past 3 months. That calmness that I do see things through a different lens of, like, listen, things could be a lot worse. We can be in a completely different situation, does translate from the back of the ambulance to people's financial plans and situations. And that's how I approach it. I take it step by step. I do basically an assessment similar to like I would if you were to call 911 and I show up. What's the problem? What do you got going on? What are your vitals? All right, here are
Mm-hmm.
some solutions. And that's, in the background, what's going through my mind and how I approach everyone's situation. And as you mentioned, I think you do get a calming feel, whether it's intentional or not. I do get that a lot. But, it's funny because I just came across that picture last night again. And, funny you brought up the calmness.
Yeah, yeah. It never ceases to blow my mind. First responders, military, guys or gals, they're on another level, dude.
Yeah.
It's just great.
It's a good thing to have, though, in a financial plan. That's what you want when you want someone managing your nest egg or your,
Mm-hmm.
future. You want calmness, you want security, you want confidence. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, 100%. All right, so let's talk a little bit more about your vision. Um, and when it comes to your practice, maybe you could talk about the next 1 to 3 years. Where do you see it going? What's your vision? Are there any goals you're working on?
There's a lot in this industry of financial planning that people don't really know about practices similar to mine in a sense. Everyone knows you got the big ones, Facet, Vanguard, Fisher Investments, but there's these practices like myself that really give personalized one-on-one care and attention to people's well-being and success. And I mean this in the best way. I want my practice to be more quality over quantity. So I do like staying smaller.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, to support a business, you do need growth and scale, but I do like having a smaller, let's say, cohort or client base that I can provide individual attention to, immediate responses and adjustments, because one, it makes their lives easier, it makes my life easier, and you just get that level of customization that I stepped away from years ago from the
Yep.
bigger firms. So
Yep.
small but mighty. There's a great book, Small Giants. I don't know if you read it. I forget the author.
It's on the shelf over here, actually. Bo Burlingham. Hold on. My books
Yeah,
are falling down the shelf. You see that?
it's a great book. If you
I
haven't, I
pulled it
mean,
off and it was
obviously,
so full it just all fell down. But this is the
it's
one, right?
I believe so. Yeah, Small
Yeah.
Giants, exactly. So, I mean, it's a great read. First off, and it's about these small companies that were doing something great in a niche, and then they got either greedy or they got approached with a situation, and they grew bigger than they could handle, and they ended up failing or not being what they were.
Mm-hmm.
And I read that book kind of when I was starting the firm, and I was like, this is how I want to build my practice. I don't want to cross that threshold. I want to be that small giant
Mm-hmm.
in the field because, one, it's lucrative for everyone. It's even more lucrative for my clients, and that's the basis and vision that I have for my firm. And we're getting there. We're growing
Yeah.
nicely.
One of the things that stood out to me about this book, actually, now that you mention it, is it says that one of the things that makes them small giants is the passion of the business owner that they keep coming back to over and over again and building their firm or their business on top of. It sounds like your passion might be providing that care to your clients.
Yeah, it does transition. I mean, there's not many advisors. I really haven't met too many that can rebound. The big joke is I can rebalance a 401k and also save your life at the same time, right? Even though that's just the iceberg of what I actually accomplish. Rebalancing 401k is easy. Saving a life at this point, 15 plus years, is second nature too. But yeah, the passion does drive from there because like I said, life is fragile. And I don't know if you've seen The Pit or that acclaimed show on HBO Max. I mean, there's a lot of
Hmm.
good life. It's based in an emergency room. Basically, what I do, plus or minus a few things on an ambulance, but I can't but help connect it to finance too. There's a lot more to life. Life's fragile, and there's a lot of good messages in there. And you know, there's structure that can get you to stepping away from work, or as I call it, work optional.
Yeah, I love it. I the parallels are just they're perfect. All right, so let's move on. I want you to take a second to brag about yourself. I think that, and I always share this whenever I ask this question, but I think so many times we as individuals, it's we think a lot about the things that we wish we were better at or that we want to be better at and that we're working on. And it's harder for us to acknowledge the things that we're good at, the things that we've done well, celebrate our wins.
Yeah.
So what I want you to do is put your humble hat on for a second and then maybe talk about something that you do for your clients that takes a significant amount of time, but that they might never see or know about. Could you brag about yourself for a second?
Yeah, I mean, just like anything, I mean, I bring the compassion into it, and I want to understand truly like what's the biggest worry, and I also provide a different perspective. So like
Mm.
my I always challenge my clients because I get a little crazy. I want them to dream and I want them to do things. I'm not the limiting advisor, like you can't spend this or anything like that. Like if you want to go out and buy a shed for your backyard, for example, I just helped a recent client. They were debating whether or not they wanted to put a back door or a backyard like bar gazebo thing. I was like, yeah, do it. I didn't even ask how much it was. I
Mm.
had another client too. Who's like, I want to go, I want to travel. I want to see my son. He's in the military. He's going to the Philippines. May meet him in North Europe, Eastern Europe. I was like, do it. She's like, how much can I spend? I'm like, I don't care how much you spend, as long as it's not like, half of your portfolio, you're going to be just fine.
Yeah.
So like, I think there's a lot of different misconceptions of advisors. They want to hold on to your money, they gather assets, right? I want you to enjoy and spend your money because I've seen the alternative. I've seen where
Life is
it
short.
doesn't
Life
even
is
it doesn't
precious.
even matter, right?
Yeah.
Your portfolio balance could be 5 million, and then you end up meeting me in the back of the ambulance on a random weekend, when I pick up a random shift or something like that, because I still give back to the community, and then that's all out the window. Now you're worried about medical bills. So I guess I'm an encouragement, I'm a confidence builder because to me personally, spending and coordinating a retirement plan or a work optional plan is easy
Mm.
compared to discussing medical issues in the back of an ambulance at ER or what's next. There's a lot more hurdles, and everyone's like, it can't happen to me. It happens all the time. Happens all the
Yeah.
time. I just had a
Well,
55-year-old we saved. I don't know what his outcome's going to be, but this the quintessential collapsed while watching TV, CPR and everything. Fortunately, we got the 1%.
dang. Yeah. Well, my old man passed away a couple years, and he had a sudden heart
Oh,
attack. And yeah, I say this all. I've shared this on the pod before, but
yeah. Sorry.
man, yeah, he was a good guy. I'm proud to be his son. But my mom had to work through all the because my dad did all the financials, and she had to work through all of that by herself. She's not retired yet. She's a kindergarten. She was an art teacher at an
Yeah.
elementary school, so she didn't have a ton of assets. So she had to work through all of that herself, that transition. And man, I couldn't imagine having somebody like you to just work through that with her, would just have been a game changer. But it's one of the reasons why, I'm so grateful for people like you, because I know the
Yeah.
value and the impact that you can have on both sides. Right. So,
Yeah.
all right. So let's talk a little bit about, so we talked about you, your story, your clients, and then some of your philosophy. Maybe we could talk about what it looks like to work with you. So maybe you could walk us through your process. So like, let's say um, somebody listening to this call is like, "Ooh, I like Nick. I'm going to contact him. You know, see how it goes." And then let's say they sign up a couple weeks from now, they become a client. What does it look like to work with you? So maybe you could explain kind of what happens the first couple of weeks. Explain that working relationship. What do you do with them? What
Yeah.
does that look like?
As I mentioned before, it kind of brings back, we kind of assess everything. We get an inventory. First we uncover where some gaps are, all overlaid on those four pillars I mentioned. So we look at healthcare, we look at taxes, we look at income sources, and we look at the portfolio. And there's not one that we particularly start with. It kind of, truthfully, the one that pops up the most is healthcare and income. So we start, typically the conversation will lead to one of those, and then it builds from there. And what we want to address is and find out is solving all factors in those four pillars. Where your healthcare is going to come from, bridging the gap if you are near Medicare, or, a few years out, what we're going to do with that. Then we'll move to the income side of things, how we're going to structure your paycheck from yourself if you do decide to retire at some point. And then we factor in and overlay taxes on top of that. I call it tax architecture. Everyone calls it tax planning. I call it tax architecture because we
I
kind
like
of,
that. You got to have different names for
you got to
the
have
same
different
thing.
name because it is
Yeah.
you are creating something, and that 3 to
Yeah.
7 years, it may not happen right away. You do need art. You do need to build up from the bottom in order to make it happen. And then, believe it or not, last but not least is typically the portfolio. And that's usually like a de-risk or a risk alignment. Because I will be honest with you, most people that I see, they're either too risky or they've been super conservative in their portfolios. They never find the sweet
Interesting.
spot, even if they are working with an advisor. I just had a recent
Wow,
client
that's interesting.
I just had a recent client who came to me, and I took a look at his portfolio. He's paying this person, mind you, he has an advisor. He came to me. He's paying this person over 1% for a basket of ETFs. That's probably over risk, and there's overlap. That
Wow. Sometimes it's crazy. Like I'll have people who come to me, advisors, and they've been working with a person for a long time. I think just at some point, long-term relationships are usually very, very successful, but sometimes you get a little too comfortable.
yeah,
You know what I mean? And just having somebody, maybe you've got a suspicion. You're like, I've been working with this person. I like them. It's fine. But maybe there's just this thing where like your gut's telling you, it's time to have somebody else look at this thing. And just being somebody who's on the outside looking in can reveal things to you that you never would have thought about or that the other person hasn't thought about. So it sounds like that's something that kind of you're talking about, right?
yeah. I mean, I worked with this client. He has a guy. He's managing just the assets. A simple question was like, have they told you how much you can spend in retirement? And have they coordinated any of your Social Security, healthcare, anything of that nature? He's like, no. I'm like,
Mm.
no,
Dang,
no. I'm like,
dang.
well, it was like, has he talked to you about taxes or where you're going to pay your taxes from? He's like, no.
Yeah, feels like it was a little too comfortable,
A
maybe.
little too comfortable. And again, it stemmed from, he was telling me the story. It was, hey, small firm started out, got bought out by a big firm, became a number, deli counter number of advisory, and then he just became the bottom rung once, they
Yeah.
became a volume business. kind
Yeah.
of where it came from, Vanguard and Power. Not that they're bad, but they just provide
It's just a different flavor, I
different
think.
flavor, and
Some
everyone you
people
get
are
what you
fine
pay
with
for.
that. Other people don't, they don't want that. So we're not poo-pooing on that, right?
No,
Everybody likes different things,
yeah, you
but
get what you pay
that
for.
doesn't work for everybody.
Yeah, you get what you pay
Yeah.
for. The biggest analogy I give is like you're flying over to Europe. There is a difference between economy and business class.
Yes, there is.
Huge
Couple
difference.
couple grand.
Couple
So,
grand, you know,
and lots of comfort, delicious
and
meals and free
quality and
drinks.
comfort.
Yeah,
And that I can't but help but think that translates so clearly into the type of financial advice that you pay for and get,
absolutely.
and the style too. You know, whether or not it's price difference or just the comfort as well. You can go to a cheap one or a big one and get the job accomplished, but are you comfortable?
Yeah. No, I love it. Nick, thank you so much for coming on the pod, sharing your
Yeah,
thoughts. I really like your background, your perspective. I like the way that you describe things and you relate everything to your background and to your story. I think that's really awesome. So for somebody who's listening who wants to get in touch with you and is interested in exploring this further with you, what should they do next? How should they get in touch with you?
yeah. The two best ways: my LinkedIn. I just search Nick Logger. I have some great content, great stories on there as well. There's a booking link right in my profile on LinkedIn. Also, my website, tacticalwealthplan.com. It gives you it's an updated site recently, really proud of it. So you can easily book a link right there in the top right corner as well. Book a calendar time with me and find out a little bit more about myself. I think there's a cool little picture of my dog on there as well. So
Well, I'm going to go there just to look at the dog pic.
I think anyway, I'm not sure. Yeah, I did include him in there. So big dog person. I'm glad. See, I
Yeah.
knew I liked you.
Yeah, I love dogs. Always had one. All right, Nick. Appreciate the time. Appreciate you sharing your insights and perspective. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, great. I really appreciate having me. This was fun.
Take care.
Take care, man.